If a hunted man asked to borrow your surname before the law could steal his life, would you lend it? At first light, Mercy heard the horse stumble up the mountain path. She set down her mending and moved to the window, where dawn light caught the storm's retreat in purple-grey shadows across the valley. Below, Silver Point's smokestacks already painted the morning sky, and she could make out the early shift heading toward the mines, small as ants from this height, but steady as clockwork. "Mama, there's a man," Emma said from behind her, voice small and careful. Mercy turned. Through the glass, she could see him now slumped forward in the saddle, his horse picking its way up the last switchback to her door. Blood darkened his shirt front, and even from here she could see the fever flush on his face. The horse wore no brand she recognized, but the man's coat hung wrong, heavy on one side. Gun weight. The watch ticked in her apron pocket. "Go to your corner, Emma. Take your doll." The child obeyed, without question, too much practice in that quick obedience. Mercy thought. Too many nights when strangers' voices meant danger, when small girls learned to disappear behind curtains and hold their breath until the all clear came. The horse stopped at her gate. The man tried to dismount, made it halfway, and crumpled to the muddy ground. Mercy counted to 10, then stepped outside. He was young, maybe 25, with dark hair plastered to his skull and 3 days of stubble. The blood came from a bullet crease along his ribs, not fatal, but deep enough to matter. When she rolled him over, his eyes fluttered open, pale blue, unfocused with fever. "Please," he whispered. "The child." "What about the child?" "Don't let them." His head fell back, unconscious. Mercy looked toward the valley. The Silver Point stage wouldn't make its run until Thursday, 2 days yet. The telegraph line ran to town, but Doc Henley lived clear on the other side of the pass, and his mare had thrown a shoe last week. By the time help came up the mountain, this man would be dead or recovered on his own account. She touched her watch. 6:41. "Emma," she called. "Bring me the big pot and all the clean rags." The child appeared in the doorway, clutching her corn-husk doll. "Is he bad?" "I don't know yet." Mercy worked her hands under the man's shoulders. "But he's hurt, and that makes him our concern for now." It took 20 minutes to get him inside and onto her father's old bed. Emma helped without being asked, holding the lamp steady while Mercy cleaned the wound and bound it with strips torn from her one good petticoat. The fever ran high, not dangerous yet, but climbing. "What's his name?" Emma whispered. "I don't know that either." Mercy dipped the cloth in cool water. But names aren't what matter when someone needs tending. The child considered this, then climbed onto the chair beside the bed. "Can I help watch?" Mercy almost said no, almost sent Emma back to her corner with orders to stay put and stay quiet. But something in the man's face stopped her, something peaceful, despite the fever, like a person who'd finally stopped running. "All right," she said. "But you do exactly as I say." The watch counted steady time, while Mercy heated broth and Emma sang quiet songs her mother had taught her, old hymns with Swedish words mixed in, melodies that seemed to ease the stranger's restless sleep. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The sky went clean and hard. By noon, the fever broke enough for him to take water without choking. Emma held the cup, while Mercy spooned broth between his cracked lips, and when his eyes opened, they focused clear and steady on the child's face. "Emma," Mercy said, "step back a little." But Emma stayed put, studying the man with the frank curiosity of a 7-year-old who'd learned not to fear everything that came up the mountain path. "Are you better now?" He tried to speak, coughed, tried again, getting there. His voice came rough but gentle. "Thank you for the water. Mama made soup too, and I sang the church songs. Did you now?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I remember hearing angels," Emma giggled, and Mercy felt something tighten in her chest, a warning she couldn't name. "Emma, go check the chickens." "But now." The child sighed and collected her doll, pausing at the door. "Will you still be here when I come back?" The man's eyes found Mercy's, asking permission. She nodded once, barely. "I'll be here," he said. When Emma's footsteps faded, Mercy pulled the chair closer to the bed. By early afternoon, full dark was 7 hours off. When it came, the kind of quiet would make every sound carry twice as far. "Who are you running from?" she asked. "Does it matter?" "It might." She touched the watch through her apron. Depends on whether they're the sort to follow a blood trail and how far behind they are. He shifted on the pillow, wincing. Far enough. And they think I headed south toward Durango. But you came north. I came here. He looked toward the window, where afternoon light slanted through glass still marked with last night's rain. Been watching this place for 3 days. Saw you and the little girl, how you manage things up here alone. Seemed like a place a man might find some peace. You've been watching us. The words came flat. Careful, not like that. He struggled to sit up, and she pushed him gently back down. Not to cause harm. Just. I haven't seen a child laugh in 2 years. Haven't seen anyone sing while they worked, or hang laundry like it mattered how straight the lines were. His eyes found hers again. Figured anyone who lived like that might understand what it means when a person wants to stop running. Outside, Emma's voice drifted up from the chicken yard, scolding the hens in her serious, grown-up way. The watch ticked steady against Mercy's ribs. What's your real name? Jack Morrison. He said it without hesitation, like a man tired of carrying other people's names. And before you ask, yes. I know what the papers say about me. Most of it's true. Some of it isn't. All of it's finished now, if you'll let it be. Mercy stood and walked to the wooden chest in the corner. Inside, beneath her few good linens and her marriage certificate, lay a stack of wanted posters she'd collected from the Silver Point post office over the winter insurance in case knowledge of dangerous men ever became useful currency. She found Morrison's face among them. $500. Dead or alive. For robbery and assault in Grand Junction. When she turned back, he was watching her with no surprise in his expression. $500, she said. That's the price. More money than I've ever seen at one time. Probably more than you'll see again for a while. His voice stayed steady. Question is, what's it worth to you to earn it? Mercy folded the poster and slipped it into her apron pocket, next to the watch. I haven't decided yet. Emma's laughter rang out from the yard, bright as silver in the afternoon air. That evening, while Emma played with her doll by the fire, Mercy sat beside Morrison's bed and watched him sleep. His breathing came easier now, and the fever had dropped enough to let real rest take hold. In the lamplight, with pain smoothed from his features, he looked younger, almost boyish, like someone's son who'd taken a wrong turn somewhere and never found his way back to the main road. Emma padded over in her nightgown, doll tucked under one arm. Is he going to stay? She whispered. For a few days. Until he's stronger. I like him. Emma. He doesn't look at me like I'm in the way. The child's voice carried that particular seriousness that came from too much adult conversation overheard, too many careful silences. And when I was singing, he smiled, really smiled, not just the polite kind. Mercy pulled Emma onto her lap. Through the window, stars showed clear and close, the way they only did at this altitude after a storm had scrubbed the sky clean. Down in Silver Point, the evening shift would be coming up from the mines, lunch pails empty, faces grey with rock dust. In a few hours, the saloons would fill with tired men spending their wages on forgetting, and the decent women would lock their doors against the night. But up here, the silence felt different. Peaceful. Like a place where broken things might have space to heal. He called me an angel, Emma said sleepily. When I was singing. Did he? Said I sounded like heaven. She curled against Mercy's shoulder. Do you think heaven has children in it, Mama? I think it wouldn't be heaven without them. Morrison's eyes opened then, just briefly, and met Mercy's across the lamplight. No words passed between them, but something settled. A recognition, perhaps, or a promise. When his eyes closed again, his breathing carried the rhythm of genuine rest. Mercy held Emma until the child fell asleep, then carried her to the small bed in the corner. Outside, an owl called from the pine grove, and somewhere far down the mountain, a train whistle echoed between the peaks. She pulled the watch from her apron near 10 o'clock. Tomorrow would bring choices that couldn't be delayed much longer. But tonight, for these few hours between one day and the next, they were just 3 people sharing lamplight and quiet, and that felt like enough. Morrison's strength returned faster than Mercy expected. By the 3rd morning, he could sit up without help and take solid food. By the fourth, he was insisting on helping with chores despite her protests. "You're still healing," she said, finding him in the chicken yard with Emma, scattering grain while the child gathered eggs. "Healing fine." He straightened carefully, one hand pressed to his bandaged ribs. "Besides, seems wrong to lie abed while you do all the work." Emma looked up from her basket. "Jack says chickens are smarter than most people give them credit for." "Jack does he? They remember faces," Morrison said. "And they can count up to 5. That one there," he pointed to a red hen pecking near the fence. "She's figured out exactly how much grain I give each scatter. Always positions herself for the best spot. You know about chickens. Grew up on a farm in Kansas." "Before?" He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything that had brought him to our mountain. "Long time ago." That afternoon, while Emma napped, Mercy found him examining the loose board in the cabin's south wall, the one that let in wind and rain no matter how she tried to patch it. "Needs to be replaced, not mended," he said. "The wood's rotted through." "Got any lumber stored away?" "Some." In the lean-to behind the house, they worked together in comfortable silence, Morrison cutting new boards while Mercy held them steady. His hands were careful, sure the hands of someone who'd learned to build things before he'd learned to break them. "Emma seems happy," he said, marking a measurement with his thumbnail. "She's had a hard winter. Her father died in October." Morrison's hands stilled on the saw. "I'm sorry. He was a good man. Worked the mines, saved every penny so we could buy this place and live clean." Mercy touched the watch through her apron habit now, like crossing herself before prayer. Lung fever took him fast. By the time we got him to town, it was too late. "That's Emma's father buried down by the pine grove? You saw the grave? Hard to miss." He resumed cutting, the saw's rhythm steady and sure. "Must have been young, 26. The words came easier than she'd expected. "Emma barely remembers him now. Sometimes I think that's a mercy. Sometimes I think it's the cruelest thing of all." Morrison fitted the new board into place. "What do you think?" "I think she needs to remember him as he was, not as sickness made him." Mercy handed him the hammer. "And I think she needs to know that good men exist, even if they don't always stay." He drove the nails with precise, economical strikes. When the board was secure, he tested it with his shoulder, solid, tight, built to last. "There," he said. "That'll keep the weather out." That evening, the three of them sat by the fire after supper. Emma played with her doll, while Morrison whittled a small wooden horse from a piece of scrap pine. His hands moved with surprising delicacy, coaxing curves from the straight grain. "Are you going to leave soon?" Emma asked suddenly. Morrison's knife paused. "Would you like me to?" "Number." The word came fierce, immediate. "But grown-ups always leave when they start feeling better. Mama says it's natural. Your mama's a wise woman. But I don't want you to be natural. I want you to stay and fix things and help with the chickens." Morrison set down the carving and looked at Mercy. In the firelight, his eyes held questions she wasn't ready to answer. "Emma," she said gently, "Jack has his own life to get back to. What if he doesn't want to get back to it?" The question hung in the air between them. Outside, wind moved through the pine trees with a sound like distant voices, and somewhere down in Silver Point, the evening train whistled its approach to the depot. Morrison picked up the carving again. "Tell you what," he said to Emma, "how about I finish this horse first? Make sure he's got all 4 legs and a proper tail before I go anywhere." Emma considered this solemnly. "How long does a horse take?" "Depends on the horse. This one looks like he might be particular about his details." The child smiled and settled back against her mother's chair, apparently satisfied with this reprieve. But Mercy saw how Morrison's hands trembled slightly as he worked, and she knew it wasn't from weakness. It was from the weight of promises, the kind that changed a person's direction, whether they were ready or not. Late that night, the fire burned lower. And outside, the mountain settled into the deep quiet that came just before dawn, brought new choices to the door. The riders came with Thursday's dawn, their horses picking up the trail at first light. Mercy heard them while she was milking the cow, their voices carrying clear in the thin mountain air, 3 men, maybe 4, asking questions at the Hendricks place a mile down the ridge. She left the milk pail and ran for the cabin. Morrison was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his gun belt in his hands. Emma stood by the window, still in her nightgown, watching the distant riders with wide eyes. How many? Morrison asked. 3 or 4. They're at Hendrick's now. Mercy pulled Emma away from the window. Get dressed. Quick as you can. Mama, what? Do it, Emma. Morrison stood carefully, testing his weight. The wound had healed clean, but he still moved with the caution of a man who knew his limits. They'll be here in 20 minutes, maybe 15 if they push hard. The back trail won't work. They've got fresh horses, and mine's still favoring that left front hoof. He buckled the gun belt, and suddenly he looked different, harder, more like the man in the wanted poster. Besides, running just means Emma gets caught in the middle of whatever comes next. Mercy's hand found the watch. 7:42. There's another way, she said slowly. I'm listening. She walked to the wooden chest and pulled out the folded marriage certificate, the one she'd tucked away 8 years ago when she'd taken her husband's name and made a home in this high, quiet place. The paper felt fragile between her fingers, but the words were still clear. Territory of Colorado. Joined in lawful matrimony. Witnessed and sealed. If you were my husband, she said, not meeting his eyes, they couldn't make me testify against you. And if you were Emma's stepfather, settled here legal and proper. She looked up. They might ask questions, but they'd have to prove you weren't who we said you were. Morrison stared at the certificate. Mercy, it's not real, just paper and words until the circuit judge comes through again. Her voice stayed steady, matter of fact. But it might buy us time. Us? Emma appeared in the doorway, dressed and clutching her doll. Mama, I can hear the horses now. The sound of hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls, growing closer. Mercy looked at Morrison, at Emma, at the marriage paper in her hands. Your choice, she said, but choose fast. The watch pressed at her ribs a little before 8. Morrison took the paper, glanced at it, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his shirt pocket. Emma, he said, his voice gentle but urgent. Come here. The child ran to him, and he lifted her onto his hip despite the pull on his healing ribs. We're going to play a game now, all right? A pretending game. Can you pretend that I'm your new papa, just for a little while? Emma's eyes grew wide. Like the dollhouse game? Exactly like that. And in this game, I've been living here with you and your mama for a long time. We're a family. And these men coming up the trail are just visitors. Can you remember that? Emma nodded solemnly. Are you going to stay after the game is over? Morrison's eyes found Mercy's over the child's head. I don't know yet, Angel, but I promise you, whatever happens, you'll be safe. The riders crested the last ridge, 3 men in dusty coats, badges glinting on their chests. The leader sat tall in his saddle, scanning the cabin with the careful attention of a man used to finding what he was looking for. Mercy smoothed her hair, checked that the watch was hidden in her apron pocket, and opened the door. Morning, gentlemen. Can I help you? The leader touched his hat brim. Ma'am. Sheriff Garrett, out of Grand Junction. We're tracking a man, dangerous fugitive, named Jack Morrison. Word is he might have passed through this area a few days back. Morrison. Mercy frowned thoughtfully. Can't say I know that name, but then, we don't get many strangers up this way. What's he wanted for? Armed robbery. Shot a bank guard in the process. Garrett's eyes swept the cabin yard, taking in the chickens, the neat woodpile, the garden plot freshly turned for spring planting. You live here alone, ma'am? Oh, no, not alone. Mercy stepped aside as Morrison appeared in the doorway, Emma still in his arms. He'd removed the gun belt, and in his work clothes, with his hair combed and his stubble shaved clean, he looked like any homesteader starting his morning chores. Sheriff Garrett, this is my husband, Jack. Jack. The sheriff's looking for some fellow named Morrison. Morrison shifted Emma to his other hip and nodded to the lawmen. Sheriff. Wish I could help, but we haven't seen any strangers lately. Have we, Emma? Emma shook her head gravely. No strangers, Papa. Garrett's eyes narrowed slightly at the word Papa, but Emma's tone carried the unconscious confidence of a child who'd never learned to lie about important things. How long you folks been married? Garrett asked. 8 years come fall, Mercy said without hesitation. Homesteaded this place together when Emma was just a baby. That so? Garrett dismounted and walked closer to the cabin. Funny thing, we talked to your neighbors down the ridge. They mentioned you were widowed recent. Morrison set Emma gently on the ground and stepped protectively closer to Mercy. That'd be my older brother, Henry. Lung fever took him last October, left us his half of the place, and we've been managing it together since. His voice carried the easy sadness of old grief. Emma there? She still calls me Uncle Jack sometimes. Takes time for a little one to adjust. I see. Garrett looked back and forth between them, clearly weighing the story. Mind if we look around? Just to be thorough. Course not, Morrison said. Though I should warn you, the place is pretty small. Not many spots to hide, even if a man was fool enough to try. The search took 20 minutes. The deputies found nothing more suspicious than a second gun in the bedroom, Morrison's Colt, which he explained as necessary protection this far from town. They examined the marriage certificate when Mercy produced it from the chest, noted the date and the territorial seal, and found no obvious signs of forgery. Through it all, Emma played quietly in the yard, singing her Swedish hymns and arranging wildflowers in neat rows. When one of the deputies smiled at her, she smiled back with the natural confidence of a child who knew herself beloved and protected. Finally, Garrett remounted his horse. Well, I reckon if Morrison came this way, he's long gone by now. Thanks for your time, folks. Any time, Sheriff, Morrison said. Hope you catch your man. The lawman rode away down the mountain trail, and the three of them stood in the yard until the hoofbeats faded into morning quiet. Then Morrison sat heavily on the porch step, and Mercy realized his hands were shaking. Papa, Emma said, climbing onto his lap. Did we win the pretending game? Morrison wrapped his arms around her and buried his face against her hair. Yeah, Angel, we won. Evening found them by the fire again, but the silence felt different now, charged with possibilities and questions that couldn't be delayed much longer. Emma had fallen asleep in Morrison's lap while he finished the wooden horse, her small fist curled against his chest. She trusts you, Mercy said softly. She trusts you. I'm just. He shifted carefully, settling Emma more comfortably. I'm just someone who happened to be here when she needed a game played. Is that all it was? A game? Morrison looked at the marriage certificate, which lay unfolded on the table between them. I don't know. What was it for you? Mercy pulled out her father's pocket watch, letting it rest in her palm. This belonged to my father. He was a good man, steady, honest, never raised his voice or his hand to anyone. When he was dying, he gave it to me and said time was the only thing we really own, and we get to choose how we spend it. And how do you want to spend yours? She looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully in the arms of a man who'd been a stranger 5 days ago. I want to spend it watching her grow up safe. I want to spend it building something that lasts. I want to spend it with someone who understands that a family isn't just people who happen to live in the same place. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. I've got a past, Mercy. It follows me whether I want it to or not. We all have pasts. The question is whether you're done with yours or if it's still driving you. I'm done with it. The words came firm. Sure. But that doesn't mean it's done with me. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring something in Swedish, one of the hymns her grandmother had taught her. Morrison hummed along softly, somehow knowing the melody. My mother used to sing that one, he said. She was from Minnesota, came over from Sweden when she was just 16. Used to say it was a prayer for traveling mercies. She'd like Emma. She'd like you both. Morrison looked at the marriage certificate again. If I stayed, really stayed, not just until the next time, trouble comes calling, what would that look like? It would look like fixing things that break. Like teaching Emma to read better and helping with the planting. Like sitting on the porch in the evenings and talking about ordinary things. Mercy traced the watch's worn surface. It would look like having someone to hand this to when my time comes and knowing Emma would have a father who chose to stay. And if the past catches up anyway, then we'll face it together. All three of us. Morrison lifted Emma carefully, carrying her to her small bed in the corner. She barely stirred as he tucked the quilt around her shoulders. When he returned to the fire, he picked up the marriage certificate. This says we were married in 1879. That would make it 8 years, like you told the sheriff. Would have been, if it were real. What if we made it real? Mercy's heart stuttered, but her voice stayed steady. How would we do that? Circuit judge comes through Silver Point twice a year. Spring and fall. Morrison folded the certificate carefully. Spring session starts next week. And until then, we're a family that's learning how to be a family. He looked toward Emma's sleeping form. She needs that, I think. Time to get used to the idea that some people do stay. And what do you need? Morrison was quiet for so long that Mercy thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I need to wake up every morning and know I'm choosing to be here. Not running to something or away from something. Just choosing this place, these people, this life. He met her eyes. I need to know that when Emma calls me Papa, it means something real. Outside, an owl called from the pine grove, and the mountain settled into the deep quiet of night. Mercy wound her father's watch and set it on the mantel, where its steady ticking would count the hours until morning brought new possibilities. Then we'd better start practicing, she said. Morrison smiled, the first completely unguarded smile she'd seen from him, and moved his chair closer to hers by the fire. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance and listening to Emma's peaceful breathing, and to the steady tick of time being well spent. When the circuit judge arrived in Silver Point 3 weeks later, he performed a wedding ceremony that made legal what had already become true. A family built not by accident of birth, but by daily choice. Emma stood between them during the vows, holding the wooden horse in one hand and a bouquet of mountain wildflowers in the other. And when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, she cheered loud enough to make the courthouse windows rattle. That evening, back at the cabin, Mercy handed Morrison her father's watch. Time, she said, for you to keep track of your own. If you'd like more stories like this, stay a while, I'll tell the next one tomorrow night.